The man who hired them knew their names. 8 names, 8 men who had never failed. He paid each one $200 in advance. He told them the target was one man who had no name. They laughed. They should not have laughed. In the territory, $200 was more than a ranch hand earned in a year. It bought silence. It bought loyalty. It bought men who could put a bullet through a whiskey glass at 40 yards and sleep soundly afterward. The cattle baron had paid in gold, counted twice, handed over in a leather pouch that smelled of sweat and iron. He told them the man had witnessed something he should not have seen, a massacre, families burned in their beds, children who would never grow old. And the man had not kept quiet. He had spoken. He had ridden to the territorial capital and given testimony to a federal marshal who never arrived. That was the rumor anyway. The cattle baron did not confirm or deny. He simply pointed to a spot on the map where the target could be found. The 8 men looked at the map. They looked at each other. They took their money, and they rode. Subscribe for more dark Western tales. One more thing before we continue. If this story finds you, if it settles into your chest the way these stories do, leave a comment. What would you have done? Would you have taken the $200? Would you have ridden into that territory knowing what waited there? The Nameless Gunslinger does not ask for your judgment. He only asks that you remember, and that you subscribe. Now, the year was 1881. New Mexico was still a territory, not yet a state. The land belonged to those who could hold it, and the cattle barons held most of it. They called it civilization. The people who lived in the small towns along the river called it something else. Corral Valley was one such town. 40 families, a general store, a saloon that served whiskey cut with water and regret, a church with a steeple that had not seen a paintbrush in 15 years. The cattle baron owned the land beneath the town. He owned the water rights. He owned the sheriff, who was not a bad man but had a wife and 3 children, and understood what loyalty cost when measured against hunger. The massacre happened 6 months before the 8 men rode out. A family named Hutchins, husband, wife, 2 daughters. They had been settlers on land the cattle baron wanted. The family refused to sell. The cattle baron's men came in the night. By morning, the house was ash and the family was gone. Neighbors found what remained and said nothing. Speaking required courage the dead Hutchins had not been granted, but one man had seen. One man had ridden through the darkness and watched from a ridge. The Nameless Gunslinger had not known the Hutchins. He had simply been passing through when the fires lit the sky. He had seen the riders leave. He had counted them. He had noted the brands on their horses. A week later, he had ridden to the territorial capital and given his account to a clerk who wrote nothing down and smiled without warmth. The Nameless Gunslinger left. He knew how these things worked. The word of an unnamed stranger against a man who owned half the territory. The math was simple. But he did not stay quiet. He could not. The fire had been too bright. The screaming had carried across the desert and lodged somewhere behind his ribs where silence could not reach it. He returned to the territory, not to hide, to wait. The 8 men arrived separately. That was intentional. The cattle baron had designed it that way. Separate arrivals meant no coordination, no suspicion, no trail that led back to his door. Each man came for his own reason and would leave when the job was done, or not leave at all. It made no difference to the man who paid. The first was called Floyd Greer. He was 36 years old and had killed 11 men, all of them documented, most of them in self-defense or close enough to it. He was fast, faster than any man alive, or so he believed. He carried 2 Colts with ivory grips and practiced drawing in front of mirrors until the motion was perfect. He walked into Corral Valley at noon and ordered a beer and watched the street with the patience of a man who had never learned to be afraid. The second was Emmett Dale. A shooter, not a fighter. He preferred distance, a long rifle, a Winchester repeating carbine, and a hill where no one could approach without being seen. He set up on a ridge 3 miles east of town and began watching. The third was called Rawls, Knife Man. He wore 3 blades on his body and had killed with each one. He did not like guns. He said guns were for cowards. He said this while carrying enough steel to open a man from throat to navel. The fourth was a brute named Coyle. 6'4", 220 pounds, hands like iron. He had beaten men to death with his bare fists. He preferred it. He said he could feel the moment a man's heart stopped. He found it clarifying. The fifth was a schemer named Whitmore. He did not fight. He arranged. He had killed 3 men without ever drawing a gun. Poison, ambush, betrayal at a card table. He planned. He waited. He executed. The 6th was called Silas Vane, a poisoner, not in the sense of blades or potions. He was a man who understood how bodies worked. He had been a field surgeon in the war. He knew which organs to damage and how long it took for the damage to kill. He carried a leather bag of tinctures and tonics and never explained what was inside. The seventh was a man called Cooley. He had never missed, not once, at any range with any weapon in any light. He was not fast. He did not need to be. He simply aimed and fired and watched men fall. The eighth was a mystery even to the cattle baron. The file said only, hired separately, arrives last, known as the collector. No other details. The baron had paid triple the others. He did not ask questions about a man who cost 3 times what 7 proven killers cost. The nameless gunslinger knew they were coming. He had felt it before. The way the air changes when too many people want the same thing. The way the desert holds its breath. He was in Corral Valley when Greer arrived. He watched from the shadow of the general store as the fast-draw specialist ordered his beer and scanned the street. The nameless gunslinger did not move. He had been in towns like this before. He knew what waiting looked like. Greer saw nothing. The stranger was just another face. There were many faces in towns like this. Men passing through. Men who would not matter. Greer left the saloon at dusk and walked to the livery stable where he had stabled his horse. The street was empty. The lamps had been lit and threw long shadows across the mud. The nameless gunslinger was waiting inside. They did not speak. Words were not necessary. Greer reached for his gun, and the nameless gunslinger did what needed doing. Quick and clean, the way a man finishes what he starts. Greer was the first. Emmett Dale watched from his ridge. He saw Greer walk to the stable. He saw the stranger follow at a distance. He waited for the sound of gunfire. It did not come. He waited for Greer to emerge. He did not. Dale remained on the ridge for 3 days. He watched the town. He watched the roads. He counted Gin Chu. He made notes. He planned. On the 4th morning, he saw the stranger ride out. He saddled his horse and followed at a distance, staying low, using the terrain. He had killed from distance before. It was his preference. 1 shot, clean, no risk. The stranger rode into a box canyon with a dry creek bed and high walls. Perfect terrain. Dale set up at the far end, found his mark, breathed out, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck stone instead of flesh. The stranger had not been there. He had moved at the last moment, dismounted and gone to ground in the rocks before Dale's shot cracked across the canyon. Dale chambered another round. He would find the target. He would wait. The nameless gunslinger waited for 7 hours in the rocks before the light failed. He moved only once. A small adjustment. From the east face of the canyon to the west, Dale did not see it. Dale was watching the east entrance where he expected the stranger to emerge. When darkness came, the nameless gunslinger moved. He moved without sound through the rocks and came at Dale from behind. Dale heard nothing. The knife was quick. Dale was the second. Rawls arrived in Corral Valley 3 days after Greer failed to return. He walked into the saloon and demanded information. The bartender said nothing. Rawls put a knife through the counter an inch from the man's hand. The bartender still said nothing. There was nothing to say. Rawls left. He began searching. He searched the stable where Greer had died. He searched the streets. He searched the desert with the patience of a man who had tracked men and animals across terrain far worse than this. He found a trail. The stranger had ridden east. Rawls followed. The stranger was waiting in an abandoned ranch house. He had known Rawls would come. He had planned accordingly. The knife man wanted close quarters. That was his strength. The nameless gunslinger would not give him that. When Rawls entered the ranch house, he found it empty. He searched each room with his blades ready. He found nothing. He turned to leave and the door behind him closed. Not by wind, by rope. A simple mechanism, a fallen beam that had been positioned to swing shut at the right moment. Rawls turned back to the door. It would not open. He tried the window. It would not open either. He was trapped. He knew then that the stranger had planned this. The man had known. He had prepared. Rawls waited for the stranger to return. He waited through the night. By morning the thirst was bad. By noon it was unbearable. He called out. No one answered. On the 2nd day, Rawls tried to break through the wall. The adobe held. He tried the roof. The timber held. He sat in the corner and accepted what was happening. On the 3rd day, he heard something outside. Footsteps. The stranger's footsteps. Rawls gathered himself. He was not done. He would wait for the door to open, and he would kill the man with his bare hands. The door opened. The stranger did not enter. He stood in the doorway and looked at Rawls with the expression that had ended more conversations than any words ever could. Rawls charged. He did not get close. The stranger was already moving, stepping back, and the rope that had held the door was now tied to the horse outside. The door swung shut with Rawls inside, and the horse pulled the structure down. Rawls was the third. Coyle came next. He walked into Corral Valley with the confidence of a man who had never been beaten. He asked about the stranger. He was told the stranger had killed 3 men already. Coyle laughed. Men were soft. Men relied on guns and tricks. He would simply walk up and break the stranger's neck. He searched for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he found the stranger in a canyon near the old ranch. Coyle charged. The nameless gunslinger did not run. He waited until Coyle was close, until the big man's fist was drawn back, until the killing blow was ready to fall. Then he stepped aside and drove a knife into Coyle's side. Not deep, just deep enough. Coyle kept coming. Blood meant nothing to him. The nameless gunslinger stepped back again and waited. Coyle swung, missed, charged again. The nameless gunslinger cut him again. Same side, same wound. The blood was flowing freely now, soaking Coyle's shirt, running down his leg. Coyle did not stop. He could not stop. Pride would not allow it. The nameless gunslinger moved to higher ground, a rock formation with a narrow path. Coyle followed, climbing, bleeding, still coming. The path narrowed. Coyle's bulk became a liability. He could not move fast. He could not swing wide. He was trapped by his own body. The nameless gunslinger waited at the top. He did not need to fight. He simply needed to wait. Coyle climbed for an hour. The blood loss slowed him. Finally, he reached the top and raised his fist to strike. The nameless gunslinger stepped back, and Coyle's momentum carried him forward. He tumbled down the far side of the rock formation and did not stop falling until he reached the bottom. Coyle was the fourth. Whitmore sent a message. That was his way. Words, arrangements, the slow poison of circumstance. He hired a boy in town to deliver a note to the stranger. The note said the stranger should leave the territory. It said he was not welcome. It said if he did not leave, he would die. Vane understood then. The stranger knew. He had smelled something wrong. He had seen the bartender's nervousness. He had deduced. Vane prepared another approach. He would need to act directly. He would need to get close enough to use his tincture without detection. He waited for night. He moved through the shadows of the town with the patience of a man who had killed many times in darkness. He found the stranger sleeping in the hayloft of the stable. He approached silently. He raised his hand with the tincture-soaked cloth. The stranger's eyes opened. Vane did not have time to understand what happened. The knife was already in his chest. He fell backward through the hayloft floor and landed in the stable below. He did not die immediately. He lay there in the dark, bleeding, understanding that the stranger had known this would happen. The stranger had been waiting, not for Vane specifically, for anyone who would come in the night. Vane was the sixth. Cooley arrived on the ninth day. He was the one who had never missed. He had heard the stories. He did not believe them. Men who never missed did not exist. Skill was one thing. Certainty was another. He found the stranger in the desert, riding slowly toward the mountains. He set up at 800 yards and waited. The stranger was moving toward him. He did not know it, but he was. Cooley chambered around and exhaled. The shot cracked across the desert. The stranger fell. His horse kept moving. Cooley watched through his scope. The body lay still. Cooley waited. He did not approach. He had learned caution from the men who had come before him. He watched the body for an hour. It did not move. He began his approach. He walked the 800 yards with his rifle ready. He reached the body and looked down. The saddle blanket was the only thing there. Cooley understood. The stranger had seen the shot coming. He had dropped from the horse at the last moment, leaving the blanket as cover. Cooley scanned the terrain. Nothing. The stranger had vanished. He turned to leave, and the stranger was there, 20 yards away, not moving, just standing. Cooley raised his rifle. The stranger did not draw. He simply stood. They looked at each other across the empty desert. Cooley fired. The bullet struck the stranger in the shoulder. The stranger did not fall. He kept standing. Cooley chambered another round. He fired again. This time the stranger fell. Cooley approached. The stranger was not dead. He was breathing. Blood on the sand. He looked up at Cooley with eyes that held no fear. Cooley raised his rifle one last time. The stranger spoke. 3 words. His only words of the entire encounter. Come closer. Cooley hesitated. He knew it was a trap. He knew the stranger wanted him close. But his pride would not allow him to refuse. He stepped forward. The stranger's hand moved, fast, faster than Cooley had ever seen. The knife was in the stranger's good hand, and it was in Cooley's chest before the rifle could be lowered. Cooley fell. The stranger stood slowly. He pressed his hand against his own wound and watched Cooley bleed out on the sand. Cooley was the 7th. The collector arrived on the 14th day. No one saw him come. He simply appeared one morning in the center of Corral Valley, sitting on a horse that had not been ridden hard, wearing clothes that showed no dust. He was a man of medium build, medium height, medium everything. Nothing distinguished him except his eyes. The town saw him and felt something they could not name. Not fear exactly, more like the feeling before a storm arrives. The collector went to the saloon and ordered a drink. He asked about the stranger. No one answered. He left a gold coin on the counter and repeated the question. A man finally spoke. He said the stranger was gone. He said 7 men had come looking, and none had returned. He said the stranger was either dead or the devil himself. The collector took his drink and rode out of town. He found the stranger 3 days later in a narrow canyon that had no exit. The stranger was sitting on a rock, cleaning his knife with a rag. He did not look up as the collector approached. The collector stopped at the edge of the canyon. He studied the terrain. He studied the stranger. He understood the situation. He had been set up. The canyon was a trap. He did not enter. He sat on his horse and waited. He had patience. He had time. He would wait the stranger out. Eventually, the stranger would need water. Eventually, the stranger would need food. The collector could wait. The stranger finished cleaning his knife. He stood. He walked to his horse and mounted. He rode toward the collector's position. The collector raised his hand. Not a weapon, a signal. The stranger stopped. They regarded each other across the canyon floor. The collector spoke. His voice was quiet, measured, calm. "You killed 7 of the best in this territory. That takes something." The stranger said nothing. The collector continued. "I was hired to kill you. I have no personal stake in it, but I have a reputation to maintain." The stranger watched. The collector made a decision. He turned his horse and rode toward the canyon's entrance. He stopped at the edge and looked back. "I will tell the cattle baron you are dead. It will cost him another $1,000. I will tell him I found you in this canyon and killed you and buried you where you fell. He will not come to check. He is not that kind of man." The stranger watched. The horse shifted beneath him. The collector waited. He did not push. He did not demand. He simply waited. After a long moment, the stranger nodded. The collector left. He did not look back. He was the last of the 8. The cattle baron waited in his mansion for 17 days. Each morning he sent a rider to the territorial capital to check for news. Each evening the rider returned with nothing. On the 18th day, a letter arrived. It was written in a hand the baron did not recognize. The paper was plain. The ink was dark. The letter contained one line: "Send better men or come yourself." The baron read the letter 3 times. He held it over a candle flame and watched it burn. That night he loaded a single suitcase into a carriage and instructed his driver to take him to the train station. He did not tell his family where he was going. He did not leave a note. He boarded the eastbound train and watched the territory disappear through the window. He never returned. In the town of Corral Valley, the people buried their dead and drank their whiskey and tried to remember what it had felt like to be afraid all the time. They did not fully succeed. The nameless gunslinger left 3 days later. He rode east toward the mountains, toward whatever came next. His horse, Scout, moved at the slow pace that meant he was not being hunted and did not need to hurry. The people of the town watched him go. None of them knew his name. None of them would ever know. But they knew what he had done. They knew that 8 men had come to kill him, and 8 men had failed. They knew that the man who had hired them had fled, and the terror he had built had crumbled. The street where the stranger had walked was empty. The stable where he had slept was quiet. The canyon where he had fought was just another piece of desert, marked by nothing. But in the memories of the people of Corral Valley, something had changed. The weight that had pressed down on them for years had lifted. Not because the law had arrived, not because justice had been served, because a man with no name had decided that some things could not be left unanswered. And that was enough.